Om Shri Sai Ram, offering my most humble and loving salutations at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagwan, Sri Satya Sai Baba. Indeed, another blessed opportunity for us to continue with this divine saga. And let us start this evening with our prayer. And I request all of you to please join me in. O Lord, take my love and let it flow in fullness of devotion to Thee. O Lord, take my hands and let them work incessantly for Thee. O Lord, take my soul and let it be merged in one with Thee. O Lord, take my mind and thoughts and let them be in tune with Thee. O Lord, take my everything and let me be an instrument to work for Thee. Om Shri Sai Ram. In this divine journey, exploring the life of an avatar, it has been such a humbling and a learning curve for all of us. Even to explore the scenarios before the advent, even to explore the reasons and the causes of his advent and what situations were arising, there is so much to learn. As they say, when Vedavyasa was capturing this whole knowledge into Ved and Upanishads and Itihas, they explain that all the learning of Vedas could be translated or depicted or presented through describing the life of an avatar. So either you study the Vedas and gain the experience, or you learn the life of an avatar and gain all the knowledge. Both they culminate in the same wisdom, knowledge, and awareness. And I think there cannot be any easier path than to explore the life of an avatar. Last week, let me invite first Brother Ranganath Raju, who has been accompanying in this journey. Sai Ram Ranga.
Sai Ram Katha.
So, this journey, Raju, has been really wonderful and so much to learn, so much we are able to explore, even though we have not even jumped officially into the Ramayan part of it. But the premise of Ramayan, the environment, the such stages before the advent of the Lord itself is surcharged with so much of knowledge and so much of wisdom that it gets overwhelming. What is your thoughts?
Absolutely. It is.
So last time we discussed about how Bhagwan uh, gave a new version of prayer, Asatoma, and that's how he brought in, and we could gather that prayer, and he gave us the new prayer like Dvaityoma Dvaityam Gamaya, and this was an amazing journey when we saw it through the diagram, which explained how we understand the visible non-duality as Satyasai, whose reflection and whose projection is the society. And from the bottom up, individual beings of all kinds rising in their awareness as pragyas merge back into Satyasai. And that was the prayer which this Dvaityoma Advaityam Gamaya taught us. So today we are looking to explore the cause of Avataran. And let me just give a little startup for you and we can jump in. We always believed that there has to be something which makes it necessary for the supreme consciousness to land. Because I remember Bhagwan also telling us that there are many avatars who have been sent or who have come and done the required deed. But for understanding purposes, Vedavyasa selected these 10 major events and which we know as Dashavatars. But it was not that avatarhood was limited to only these 10. There are many more, and many were even described as Anshavatar and all that. So there is a different description of that. But in every stage, there has been a reasoning or a cause for which an avatar takes birth. Whether it is an Amsha avatar or it is a Sampurna avatar, it has its own boundaries and requirement. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, brother. In fact, one of the uh, sessions that Swami blessed us with, he has he had kind of deliberated on this Dashavatar, which we had spoken in other sessions, where Swami explained very clearly as to the conceptualization of Dashavatar. In essence, talks about the evolution of life itself. It is a very figurative way of saying as to how life evolved on this planet. First, it started in the water, which is, in fact, not on the planet itself, even in human body. It starts in the liquid, uh, the sperm, and then the tortoise, then the fetus. It looks like a pig, and then when it when it kind of takes shape, it is half animal, half man. Then comes the small little man Vamana, and he grows up. He's controlled by his emotions. The Parashurama, he's like, he throws his tantrums around. He goes around. I mean, what Parashurama has done in some sense. Then he grows up to be an ideal man, Sri Ramachandra himself, and then he leads the world onto salvation. Sri Krishna, armies, lakhs of people were led by him. And then Swami went on to explain, he did not elaborate, but he went on to mean as to how Kalki was Swami himself, that Satya has taken the form. So, this in essence, Swami was talking about Dashavatar being a depictive uh, summary of how life evolved on this planet. But he see all, because that's a very important point which Swami is making. By not making, what he was saying is, don't limit these avatars to just this 10. He said, whenever there is descent, whenever there is descent of dharmic practice, whenever there is that Allah Kallolam, he said, the vicissitudes of creation take overpower, then the supreme consciousness comes down. It takes a form and comes down, and it takes various forms. In fact, Bhagavatam also describes about 42 avatars, Amsha avatars, then not Paripurna avatar, but Purna avatar, Paripurna avatar. It gives off so many definitions, so many aspects to Avataran.
See, most of these avatars are described from Narayan's perspective. If you
Yes,
include Shiva's perspective, then you have got another laundry list of avatars.
absolutely.
Okay, so but we have, for our understanding purposes, we have divided between Shiva and Narayan and everything. But actually, it's a one consciousness which takes different, forms to teach us lessons. So if you take that list of avatars, then it is a huge. But having said that, now what is the purpose? I think the one of the most famous verses in Bhagavad Gita, which all of us keep repeating whenever we have to think about why Avatar takes birth, was Yada Yada hi Dharmasya. So there we understood from that verse that whenever there's a decline in righteousness, whenever the devotees are in distress, and Lord takes form to do all of that. But as a trademark sign of Bhagwan Baba, he always says something which is not commonly thought of. And Swami said, for that, I don't need to come physically. It can be done. But my prime purpose of my coming is to give joy to my devotees. How else a devotee can connect with God if he does not have some kind of a physical relationship? So to build that bond with devotees, Avatar takes the form and goes through the human experiences. And the beauty is that, yes, then he said, then dharma sthapana, vedodharana, dushta samrakshana, deva samrakshana, all that happens. It is like, it is ancillary which happens on the way. So that is how Bhagwan explained the whole thing.
In fact, one of
Have you
the
heard anything? Yeah.
yes, brother. In fact, one of the devotees from Telangana state, quite elderly gentleman, he was once telling me of. So those were the days when Swami would often come to Hyderabad and many parts of Andhra Pradesh. And on one such occasion, Swami ended up waiting for the gentleman to come so that he could give darshan. He was actually waiting in front of his door in Hyderabad, and the gentleman had gone out for some work, and then Swami waited for some time, and so whatever after Swami giving darshan, he was quite taken aghast, just kind of surprised that Swami, God himself, he said, Swami Avatar himself had to wait like that for me. My sincere apologies. I was not aware of your tour. He was trying to apologize, and then he made a very innocent comment. Said, Swami, why don't you? No, you look like. In fact, at the point was that the the watchman hesitated to allow Swami inside because the master was not inside. He said, the owner of the house is not inside, so don't come in. So he was quite apologetic about the incident that happened. And he was telling that, Swami, you look like any of us. Probably the watchman got confused. So my apologies, but why don't you look something special? Probably Avatar can come with four hands or with that mukut. Why don't you look like that? And then Swami made a profound statement. He said, had I come that way, had I come with that mukut, or had I come with those four arms and the tall personality, you would have put me in a museum and you would have collected fees to look at me. Said, if you have to feel a kinship with God, if you have to develop that oneness with Lord, I have to move amongst you like you. And if you look at various, especially Swami talks about, and one discourse Swami makes it very clear. As per Swami's definition, the Purnavatar says Rama, Krishna, and then Swami talks about Satsai being the Purnavatars. And he talks, if you look at these three, or probably any other avatar, they move amongst humans as humans. They live like humans. They undergo all the trials and tribulations of human life, all the challenges of human life. And yet, they show us the way that anyone can follow to win over these and be eternally happy.
Another aspect of a reason for Advent, what I have found is that there has to be an equally powerful reasoning for equally powerful remedy. So what I mean to say is that unfortunately it is a peak of negativity which brings the peak of divinity down. So if you
Yes.
have a small injury, then maybe a compounder can save you. But if you have a major accident, then only you need a specialized surgeon to handle you. Similarly, avatar, a Sampurna avatar can come when there is Sampurna problem. So equal issues. And each yuga, we notice that the coming of an advent of an avatar is preceded by that extreme events which have got no other solution, which nobody else can handle. And that is where the supreme consciousness dawns. So here we would like to bring in, because we have already seen the scenarios preceding Lord Rama's advent, We have seen the social structure. We have looked at how the society was structured, how the knowledge base was there, how people were distributed, identified, and there comes Lord Ram. So when I look at Raju, the whole social structure, it looks very perfect to me. You look at that, the perfect knowledge base, right? And
Right.
you see that even the Vanaras, whether they were forest dwellers or Rakshasas who had chosen a different lifestyle, everybody was knowledgeable. Everybody could rattle off Vedas, right?
Absolutely. If we take for example the major characters and just look at, probably it will lead us to the discussion, look at their achievements. Someone like Ravana could take away his head, and in fact he could pull out his intestines and could strum them as veena. And Shiva was so forced that he had to materialize himself in front of Ravana because he lifted that entire Kailasa and put it on his shoulders, which is unimaginable to someone of the current times. For Vali, he would do his morning ablutions in the Eastern Sea. Then by the evening, he would again jump from Kishkinda to Western Sea, that is Pacific, and he would do his ablutions there and come back. Sandhya Vandanam there and come back. This is his daily schedule. Or look at someone like Vasista. He had been there, I do not know for how many years, in ages. He was advisor to the to in fact to the grandfather's grandfather of Dasharatha. He had been there, and a stalwart. Each one of them were no humans, I would say, by our standards. And yet, why did Rama descend? That's an interesting question. We should delve deeper.
Let's look at, because when we looked at the whole scenario, and if you look at Treta Yuga, that explanation, Dharma was followed by all, in fact, in letter and spirit. And the negative element was Mada. So let us explore this part, which is so beautifully presented by Swami, that how we have to look at that age, that era of Yuga of Treta, where Dharma was followed by all. Is it so? And I remember you mentioning about Minakshi, whom we know as Shurpanakha. So, Raju, would you like to start from there and say
Yes,
how she was following her Dharma?
absolutely. In fact, there is an interesting conversation where she provokes Kara and Dushana, and also Ravana. Ravana was no fool to get agitated by the rants of a woman. We cannot assume that Ravana was just agitated because his sister was disfigured. He was a ruler of a magnanimous city. I mean, a city which was made of gold. Imagine all the systems and processes he would have had, and what was the reason that he was enraged, or why did Kara and Dushana, the partying, the commanders of the army of Ravana, who would go around and establish supremacy, why were they enraged? And why in fact was no guilt in Meenakshi's heart when she proposed to Rama? It is because she was following the dharma, her own definition of dharma. What is the dharma? That according to her, a woman, if she likes, she can go and approach a man, and man has no right to refuse it. Man has to accept her, accept a woman. That was the social system at that time. And when she went and asked Rama, it was in fact from her eyes, Rama was being adharmic. From her eyes, Rama was not living up to the standard of the age. So that is what provokes Kara and Dushana. That is what provokes Ravana. He says, how could someone be like that? And that's why he says humans are weak, because they are not strong enough to stand up to the value systems of the society. The definition of value systems probably differed for Rama and Ravana, but the point is, yes, they had their own dharma, and
So,
that led to the entire war.
so if you look at it, even the Vanaras, if you look at the forest dwellers, like Bali, according to him, he was correct in his behavior. And Ravan, he himself thought he's correct in his behavior. So if you look at it, everybody was knowing Dharma. That is very interesting. Everybody was well versed with scriptures. Bali himself was a great scholar. Sugriva was a great scholar. Ravan, of course, we all know. Anybody you take, whether it is Rakshasa, Vanaras, or Manav, all had access to knowledge, all were learned, so everybody knew Dharma from its core. But what made them deviate from interpreting it in their convenient manner was mud. And mud is pride. Pride is a very soft word if you literally translate it, but it is little more than the pride. It is that ego filled with pride. So you get into that pride of understanding and application, that I know I'm right. That itself is a pride. And they were stuck in that. So this pride, can you explain this part of Mada when we talk about in application how Mada ruined all of them?
Yes, brother. In fact, if we look at, for example, when the first conversation that happens between Vali and Rama when Rama emerges from the bushes was not why did you was not about uh, insulting Rama, but the question Vali asked was, why did you shoot me from behind a bush? It is adharmic. The concept again goes back to dharma and adharma there. Here is a man is dying, he has lost his kingdom, his brother has betrayed him. He's not worried about that, but he is worried about why. Why were you adharmic? Because in his own definition, as you beautifully said, he was following his own dharma, and he makes an offer. Rama, in fact, when Rama comes to him, Rama touches his hand. He has a realization. Swami beautifully explains as to how Vali realizes his folly, and he begins to weep. But even in that, he had that audacity to make a proposal to Rama, saying that Rama, you could have chosen me. I was the
Instead
one.
of Wali.
Yeah, instead of Sugriva, you could have chosen me, Vali. I held that Ravana in my armpit. I can vanquish the entire Rakshasa force one-handed, single-handedly. Why did you choose Sugriva? But he gets his answer. That's a different point. But the point is, he was so proud of his achievements. Then he goes on to regale that I went on. I would jump from morning to evening, from this to that. I can do this. I can do that. And when again Rama touches him, and he realizes that in spite of all that, he lost the basic sense of morality, and he started suspecting his brother. And the same is the case with Ravana. That pride again. He was so proud that when Narada comes to him and says that, boss, who someone is going to take birth in that little girl Kausalya's womb in years to come, he says, how dare you even speak about someone taking birth that can kill me. And Narada has to in fact, that Kodai trip where Swami beautifully tones it, Swami beautifully explains. He says Narada had to tone it down, saying that he was a little worried that this fellow might harm Narada. And he says, no. See, the point is, there is a probability of you getting harmed through her child. So why don't you take a look at it? And that's how Ravana goes and kidnaps Kausalya, and then he packs her in a box, and as God's design, she ended up with Dasharatha. But the point is, even at that point when Radha comes to warn him, he talks about the pride of who he is. And even when Vibhishana talks to Ravana scoffs, saying that what are those humans? And he is so proud of his achievements, of what he has done. He says that this hand that has worshipped the Shiva 24 hours of every day, this tongue that has recited his glory, these feet that have walked up to Kailasa, how can they ever be defeated? No, he was proud of his achievements, he was proud of his knowledge, he was proud of his devotion. That pride was the undercurrent that bound everything of Ravana. Same was the case with Vali. If you look at, same was in fact the case with every villain that fell in uh, Ramayana.
Interesting. So if you look at this, the cause which they say that mud, the pride of people had so much in them that because of which, even though they knew Dharma and they were practicing according to themselves, it became such a serious event that to fix this part, Avatar had to take birth. So, from today's perspective, when I look at it, it doesn't sound that serious, right? It doesn't sound, the severity doesn't look that much. That what is a small deviation, it could be fixed. But at that era when everybody was so pure, everybody was so knowledgeable, the systems were already in place, that time a small deviation matters. I recall once Bhagwan was explaining, he always talks about the Atma Ramayan style. And he says one of the reasons for the physical distancing of Ram and Sita was that Sita was so pure, already involved with Ram. She was totally absorbed in Ram. But when she entertained one thought of a deer, a golden deer, which represented the world, which represented the vagaries of the world, even that thought became the cause for her separation from Lord. So if you have to remain close to God, you have to be always pure and introspective. If by chance also we allow that small little deviation, because of which a negativity or a temptation or even a deviation enters the system, it can lead a separation from the Lord. And I'm sure the people who have been in close proximity with Swami, they have this tough experiences with Bhagwan, that when I've asked a couple of seniors who used to be with Bhagwan and serve him in early 80s, and they would confess that they said we don't even think in his presence. Then we don't even try to think, because we just be there, because by mistake if something enters the head, he is going to react. So you have to be so conscious in front of an avatar. And here we are talking from a Kali Yuga's perspective, when Avatar had already given a lot of concessions to us. But when you talk about Treta Yuga, which was predominantly Sattva, at that time a deviation of that nature can literally cost you an association with Avatar.
Absolutely, brother. In fact, I was kind of lost with this thought many times. And when I was with TVS Motor, uh, in the factory they would manufacture these machines, the heart of the two wheeler, and it has those four piston cylinders. All of us quite know about the engineering. Now, it is a massive campus. At one end, you have those dirt race tracks where these mud bikes would go around, off-road bikes would go around, and a lot of mud and dust is in the air. Anybody in that surrounding would be filled with with that mud and slush and all that, because those bikes are meant to be tested in that environment. Now, that's at one end of that campus, and at the other end is this place where the IC engines, the combustion engines were manufactured. There, when you enter, you have to three air guns would actually kind of cleanse you completely, and then you have to wear that uniform. Even your breath is neither your hair nor your breath is allowed to be, to be without sanitization. It is because the circumstances and the surroundings are such, the demands of that place is such that you have to be so pure if I have to use the word. And it is probably similar to the avatar and the demands of the time. Probably Treta Yuga was like that ICE manufacturing facility where any small deviation. I remember first time when I was actually had gone in for orientation. I did not refuse. I refused to wear the mask and all that. So they stopped and said, you have probably caused, you would have probably caused some crores of damage to the manufacturing process. Even a hair follicle would kind of throw many of these machines off. So you have to be very careful. That's when I realized that small deviation, which apparently is a small deviation in our eyes, may not be a small deviation for those times and circumstances.
True,
And
true.
that's exactly the was the reason for Rama Rama's advent into Treta.
And look at that Dwapar Yuga, and they explain Dwapar as Dharma was followed by all in letter, but not in spirit.
Absolutely,
In the
absolutely.
spirit essence, they were, and that is why you have the greatest example of Shakuni, who was master of manipulating the Dharma. He would take the right word and manipulate it, and which gave birth to, the mother became moha and lobh, which is pride, attachment, and greed, which all of them together camouflaged and ruined the dharma. So the following of dharma was literally everybody could quote dharmic texts. Everybody knew. I remember there's a famous quote by a verse of Duryodhan, right? Jana me dharmam nachame
Yes,
pravritti, jana me adharmam nachame nivritti. So I know what is dharma, but I can't follow it. I know what is adharma, I can't give it up. So that is the state of Dwapar Yuga, wherein everybody knew dharma, but they did not follow it in the spirit of it. And they were also crowded by pride, attachment, and greed. So that became the camouflage cause for. So look at how Bhagavan has given the core reasoning, a deviation as a era, as a aeon. In Yuga, what is the core deviation which needs to be addressed? And that's how we look at it. So, and I would put the third one also, and then you can share.
yes, brother.
So,
Yes, no, yes. It's, as you said, dharma is manipulated in every sense. There, at least in letter it was followed. Now in Kali, both the letter and spirit of dharma are gone. And there in the Treta there was just Mada. So that Mada got added Lobha and Moha. Now in Kali, all the other three also have come in: Kama, Krodha, Matsara. That is Kama, desire, endless
Matsarya.
desire; Krodha, anger generated from ego; and Matsara is tremendous jealousy.
Matsarya,
So,
yes.
and these six have become the six vices that bound man to endless suffering, and that's why avatar has to come. Now Swami adds very nicely saying that the avatars of that time had the advantage of not displaying that, or probably displaying superhuman powers at points of time to awe. Now very nicely he says in poetic way that this avatar is bound by the restriction that, even though he displays that superhuman power, he has to appear like one amongst others, because the Harshad Vargas would play havoc with the thinking of human. In this one beautiful discourse, he says, in fact, at one point of time, many sadhus were getting jealous of Swami's popularity, and Swami says they were sadhus. It's a very nice way of Swami puts it, saying that how even display of divinity becomes, because of the Arshad Vargas, becomes a problematic matter for human mind in this age. So the constraints for the avatar in this age are far higher than Treta and Dwapara.
And another thing which he has mentioned is a false sense of knowledge. So basically, if you look at around, you will also find that most of the people have not self-indulged in reading or studying the scriptures. We have heard it thanks to some television serials. We know our itihas, we know our major storylines of our epic. But if you really look at it, how many of people have read the text themselves? That would be really shocking. And then you have a false sense of achievement. Like I remember Bhagwan defining success. Success is not something he would define that. In MBA he actually did that, and he said success is not in achieving something external. It is when you conquer yourself. It is the conquering advancement of self that is a true success. So imagine the whole definition of success we look at it today is very external to us. That I got marks, I got profit, I got sale. It is all external to me. And I'm trying to enhance myself apparently from the external achievements. And that I call success. Whereas Bhagavan says external achievements are not your success. Your true success is when you have moved ahead in your consciousness higher and higher. So it is the self introspective, you know, jump that qualifies for success. So every day are you better than yesterday? If that is the way, then you are successful. So imagine the way Bhagwan looks at it, and then he tells you that the false sense of knowledge and the false sense of achievement are the trademark identification of the Kali Yuga. Today, everybody claims to know everything, even though we know nothing. We still claim that we have read, or we are from the land of Bhagavad Gita, so we must know it. But the fact of the matter is, this is the qualification of Kali Yuga, and that scares actually, if you look at it. Yes, Raju.
Yes, brother, I was just thinking about one statement that Swami made to one of my classmates. His name was Bose. He said, uh, after certain conversation, someone told him that Bose knows nothing. He was Bose. By Bose, he was meaning not just him, but all the boys around. He said, Bose knows nothing, but yet he acts as if he knows everything. Baba knows everything, and yet acts as if he knows nothing. And he said that is the problem with all of you, right? And then Swami went on to talk about other things. Probably, the prayer that you are reciting in the beginning. I remember one of our brothers, senior brothers, was sharing that when Swami had composed it, he was trying to tell Swami that Swami, the order of these lines, it is not proper. First it should be body, it should be hands, then should be mind. And then Swami gave a deep stare and said, "Whom are you?" Like that statement, like, "Whom are you telling?" Uh, and it took a minute for these brothers to realize that, "Oh my God, I'm actually telling the destination of my prayer to correct the prayer." He said, "I'm sorry, Swami," but right, that that sits on all of us. That false sense of knowledge, false sense of achievement. And Ravana had a pride, whatever said and done, yes, he had done certain things. Unfortunately, he had the pride of doing those things. But in the current situation, I remember one of the boys after one particular drama who had acted as Ravana, he because they have to pose for the photographs, he was kneeling for quite some time. They were waiting for Swami to come down because Swami had to bless. Swami was quite happy that day. Swami blessed Prasadam, then Swami blessed clothes. Swami was speaking to for a few elders. Swami was quite happy with the drama. By the time Swami came down to pose photograph with this boy, since this boy was kneeling for quite some time, who had acted as Ravana, he was quite well built. So now when Swami came and Swami was posing, this boy wanted to get up and stand next to Swami, pose next to Swami's throne. And when he was about to get up, he had cramps in his legs, so he was not able to stand properly. He took the help of two, three boys, stood, and then Swami gave that satirical state to him like that, through his eyes, left eye, and said, "Hey, Vira, you acted like Ravana, and yet you are not able to sit even for a few minutes. That Ravana sat for thousands of years and could do tapas. This Ravana is not able to sit even for a few seconds." He said, "Anta action, anta action." So that is is in some sense is what we are ending up with. We have that the acting tendency, but not the being or living tendencies. And it's a challenge for the avatar to implant, to take away those and implant the tendencies of being and living. In
I
fact,
was
yes.
sorry. Please carry on. Please carry on.
No, no, no. I was only just saying that at least Rama did not have this problem. Krishna had this problem to an extent, and but Swami, after one of these dramas in Purnachandra Auditorium, I think it was early batches convocation drama. One of the VIP uncle who was who used to sit in that first D, he had told this story. Swami was going up after the drama. The drama was about Krishna, and then Swami said, as he was passing, some said, only I knew how to the pains. Only I knew the pains of making all those people dance. He was meaning both, both on the stage and off the stage. And he said that time only few Pandavas and a little bit of Kauravas. కొంచెం కొంచెం మంది, he was telling in Telugu. And then he says, but Ippudu, and it turns like this and shows to the entire auditorium filled with people. So these many people. Yes, he said these many people have to be danced. In one more discourse, Swami says that time I had to tell only one Arjuna to hold Gandiva and fight. He said, now this time I have to tell so many Arjunas in so many ways to hold that Gandiva and fight, and yet I am not tired.
So sweet. There was a question that when you look at this whole mad and dharma issue from a perspective of a cause of Avataran, uh, they are saying that the Ragukula, that lineage of Ram, they were all great kings. They were actually rishis on their own caliber. Even Dasharath was supposed to be the conqueror of the whole earth. And Chakravartin, he was a Mahachakravartin and he was ruling the whole earth at one point of time. And he had committed no mistake per se. And one mistake he committed, and so how did the mother plays role there? And that was a good point of discussion. So would you like to start on that?
Yes, brother, and yes, I think we should actually dwelt on that a little longer. But that one mistake of Dasharatha, if you look at the entire sequence of Ramayana, uh, the pathos, if you have to use the word, that Rama leaving Ayodhya, then walking away, and so many people being destroyed, Dasharatha kind of falling dead, then Sita getting kidnapped. All this started with one folly of Dasharatha. He shot that Shravana Kumara, mistaking him to be some animal drinking water. He was so confident of his that Shabdaberi Vidya that when he heard the sound, when Shravana Kumara was actually filling up the pitcher with that water from the river, he mistook that sound of the pitcher filling water to a beast gulping water, and he shot the arrow. Because of that, Shravana died, and while dying, his last wish was, please pass on the jar of water to my parents. And when Dasharatha, out of guilt, conveys his folly towards the father of Shravana Kumara's father curses him. And I request you
Actually,
to
Raju, actually,
continue.
Raju, there was another version to that. I
Yes.
believe Bhagwan also shared one day that it was not a curse. Shravan Kumar's parents don't curse him.
Ah,
Obviously, out of the painful heart, there is a very beautiful thing they say, ah, in Hindi. There is a word called ah. When there is a hurt, there is a kind of a cry which comes out of the heart. And we have an expression called hi. Hi lagti hai. We say hi like this, like you get that bad feeling from your heart emanating for you. So it was that of the father, and it seems the father says to Dashrath that I know it is not your fault. You have done it by mistake. But unfortunately, your actions have hurt me, and I can't help it. The hurt is so strong that you have to suffer yourself the same pain that I have suffered. So the version is not actually, if you look at it, it can
right.
be easily transported that, okay, it was a curse, but actually he was just sharing that Dashrath, you brought hurt to me, so unfortunately you also have to face the same hurt. A pain of separation from your son has to be felt by you. But I haven't, I can't help it. That is a version of that. And Dashrath again reiterates that please forgive me because I have not done it knowingly. It was a really an innocent mistake. And then the father smilingly replies that yes, Dashrath, because it was an innocent mistake of yours, so only you will suffer. If you would have done it consciously or knowingly, then the whole nation of yours, your whole samrajya would have suffered. So imagine being a king. If you commit a mistake, The repercussions are not just for you per se. It can trickle down to the whole kingdom. And that was a revelation to me, that how law of karma works, and how mud, that pride, can destroy one's thinking capacity. Otherwise, he would have shot that Shabdabedi Bhan, that arrow of listening to the sound, many times before. Why he made a mistake in this time? And they also say that that tradition got then diluted. Then you know, uh, it was very less followed, and up to Prithviraj Chauhan in the recent times, who practiced that art. So it flew down. But the fact was that mother, and that
Absolutely.
story I want to just jump in for you. Sorry about that.
No, no, go on, brother. Sorry. Yes, I think that's a very important point. In fact, I was requesting you to add this flavor. And in fact, if, brother, the point that you made of the karma uh, biting back the subjects, if it is committed by king and if it is committed by father, it is a similar point is brought out even in the case of Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra talks about, Draupadi asks a very pertinent question. He says, who was silent? Was it the father of Duryodhana or was it the king of Hastinapura when I was being disrobed? And Dhritarashtra was speechless. And he says, he did not want to say the father of Hastinapura. He says the king of Hastinapura was silent, was the response given by Bhishma. And the father of Hastinapura, the father of Kauravas was left unhurt. But the king of Hastinapura was wiped out. The Duryodhana and the entire clan and everyone who supported the king of Hastinapura were taken away. The father was left unharmed. Dhritarashtra and his wife went on to live even after the war. Uh, Krishna explains in a beautiful in a
Wow.
beautiful manner. He says it is because the king was blind, his entire army, his entire vassal kingdoms have to suffer. Was blind in the sense of judge, in the sense of dharmic judgment. And now, if we come to the same case of pride, even Dasharatha, coming back to Dasharatha's case, even if you look at this pride, look at the way in which he promises Kaikeyi. No, he is here, he is married, he's already married to Kausalya, he still hasn't got a child, then he marries Sumitra, still no child, and then he goes into a war with those hordes of Kashmir, and Kausalya Kaikeyi comes to his aid and she protects him, and he's so fascinated with her valor, with her beauty, that he makes a promise, blindly saying that I will marry you, and the condition that father puts is my daughter's child has to be the king, and says so be it. He should have waited, paused. He should have waited for a few minutes. In fact, Vasishtha warns him, saying, "What did you do, Dasharatha?" He says, "I have given away my word," and it is that same word that comes back to him, biting. That
If
pride.
you if you read if you read Rama's vision of Ramrajya, in that there is one verse which says that never make a promise without consultation.
Yes, yes.
A king should not take major decisions without consultation. So these are guidelines given by Ram. So I'm not sure whether it was because of that or what, but there is a dictum. Even in Yoga Shastras, that what do you call that? Dandaniti. In
Hmm.
there also it is explained that a king should not make a call without consulting at least to three advisors, separately and together. So imagine the barriers which are already laid down. But you can say Dashratha had that pride which led him to make that call, and that suffered again. So actually, if you look at it, the whole whatever known history of Dashrath, we can say there are two events which his the mother overpowered him, and those two events were the cause of the whole decline, which in a way became also a reason for avatar descent. So now you can look at it from both sides. That did avatars play the game trick for Dashrath to do that so that Ram could come? or he did that so Ram could come. So whichever way you want to look at it, that is fair. But that is how we can look at it, that twice he made a mistake based on the mud, the pride of knowledge, the pride of skills, the valor, and that is became the cause of his ruin and for everybody else's pain. Isn't that I think his whole thing is so beautiful. And how do you think, Raju, Bhagwan takes this whole journey of dharma and how he doesn't expect us to behave, and what is the pinnacle of dharma that he wants us to, understand and practice?
Yes, brother. In fact, that is the beauty of Avatar. That if you any circumstance that he enters into, he elevates the definition into a into an astounding heights to an astounding heights. He talks about when, for example, when Jabali tells Rama that Rama, it's a father and son promise. No, don't let the kingdom suffer because of a disagreement between father and son. Rama immediately elevates that conversation, saying that Jabali, you have Rama gets angry, as we discussed in other episodes. Rama gets quite upset with that suggestion of Jabali, and Rama lashes out to him. Vasishtha calms him down, and then Rama explains, saying that Jabali, you have not understood. It is not about father and son. It is about dharma. It is about the obedience of a son and dharma, whether the son is following dharma or not. He makes it dharmic and adharmic, and even if we come to the case of Krishna with Pandavas, he he talks about Arjuna taking up the bow and arrow not to fight his cousins who have usurped the land. He says no, it is not, because it is your duty to stand up for upholding dharma. Again, he elevates the war between two families to a war between dharma and adharma. In this case, again, when Sugriva asks Rama that Rama, uh, he does not ask explicitly, but he kind of conveys that the war has so many losses, etc. Essentially, telling, do we need this war with Ravana for your wife? No, why can't you look at someone else? He would not say it. He would not have dared to say it with Rama, but he was probably meaning it. And Rama elevates again, saying that it is not about getting my wife back. It's not about getting a woman who is dishonored and for that killing so many. No, it's not about. It is about taking unrighteousness head on, taking adharma head on. I am fighting this war not for Sita alone, but for upholding dharma. When Agastya makes to a prayer to Rama, saying that Rama, in Dandakaranya, so many people have died because of Rakshasas. He says, it there if you keep their skulls, you actually can form a huge heap. In fact, a mountain. Rama is so moved, he gets up and takes a vow, saying that in spite of spending 11 years, 11 months in the Chitrakuta mountain, which is self sufficient in water, self sufficient in food, he could have spent those just 3 more years and nothing would have happened. His entire 14 years would have been a picnic. But he says it is to uphold the dharma of Kshatriya, that giving protection to the denizens of the forest, that I will go and stay in Chitrakuta, in Dandakaranya. That's when all the trouble starts. One after another starts coming, right from our Meenakshi, then Kara Dushana, then Ravana himself, and Sita gets kidnapped. Rama, there was no necessity for Rama to go and stay in Dandakaranya. That was done to uphold Dharma. So Avatar elevates every action into Dharma Stapana. If he comes down to Dharma Stapana. One of the brothers had, he had reported it wrong to Swami. He was in Gram Seva. He was supposed to be in that control room, and he would give updates to Swami as to the conversation that have happened. And then he went on to tell Swami that Swami, today so much stock got wasted. That was the update that he had from the control room for the Gram Seva. And Swami heard the statement. In fact, his brother told me later. His Swami heard the statement, and Swami asked him, "Did you go and check?" He said, "No, sir." So where is this update coming from? He said, Swami, from walkie-talkie. I overheard two boys talking on walkie-talkie. Swami was so upset. He said, it is not about you reporting the things that have happened there. It is about that attitude that when crosstalk is overheard and you kind of acting a spy and telling me. See, Swami was not happy with that behavior. Next day, he made sure that this boy was part of that truck which goes around every location and checks the stock physically. And the avatar for avatar, it is about dharma stapana and nothing else.
So how do we look at this concept of dharma sthapana when we say dharma sthapana? Uh, what exactly it entails, what it encompasses?
Yes, brother. Okay. It's a, hmm. So,
Do you want to
brother,
have?
yes, brother, would you lead this discussion?
No, I've given a little thought to it, and whenever I look at the concept of dharma, it is literally like a black hole. The more you go into it, the more universes you find in it. But in a very putting it in a very simple terms, for for understanding dharma, for practicing dharma, we need to understand dharma. And for understanding dharma, a lot of introspection and continuous self assessment is required. So when we talk about dharma sthapana, it is an it's like empowered being walking around who are fully aware of who they are. So that means they are supposed to be like Jivan Muktas who know what they are, and they are chasing to be remaining in that status. We Swami used to say, upsu jabsu. You one day you are very high, another day you fall again, and again you jump and then you come down. So this upsu jumpsu is happening because we are not able to sustain ourselves in that level. So when dharma sthapana is when we all start to conduct in a manner of awareness and make every effort to remain there. And the moment we slip, we rise again. So that one day this fall and rise gets less and less, and we become constant. And that is the state which is usually defined as sthita pragya stage. When you remain there. So, and this is the beauty of dharma sthapana, that if people with knowledge, with awareness, can be conscious in their lifestyle and have the ability to discriminate, think before they act, probably then it can be said that dharma sthapana has happened, because we are all on the path of satya, of truth, of realization, and which is only done through dharma. So a constant integrated awareness, as some would call it CIA, that constant integrated awareness stage, if we can be conscious of it, then probably that is dharma sthapana. So I don't know. What do you think about it?
Beautiful, brother. Very nice. Fantastic.
So, like Swami would always say, that dharma sthapana is basically atma dharma.
Atma
So the
Dharma. Yes.
atma dharma is the state in which he literally takes all of us to. What
And
is your
Swami
thought
makes
on that?
very, very, very important point. It says each yuga, when we talk of Treta, then Dwapara, Krita, Treta, Dwapara, Kali, there is a feeling that Dharma declines in each of these periods. Swami makes a very important point. He says Dharma does not decline. He says Atma is eternal. It is the same Atma is in Krita. It remains to be same in Kali. He says it is not the dharma that declines, but it is the practice of dharma that declines. And
Yes.
avatar comes to set an example as to how this practice can be imbibed in day-to-day living. And that's how Rama came in, Krishna came in, and that is what Swami also showed us. And the practice of dharma in each of these ages takes a different form. We will get to that in the discussion.
Actually, since you have mentioned it, I think there's a good point, good time to insert that. Because when you look at the practice of dharma, there it is important for us to understand how the actions happen and how it is explained that how this whole cosmos is run and how our behaviors are actually governed. And it is very beautifully said in Shastras, also in Purans, that we are all governed by three gunas, which started at the beginning of creation: sattva, rajas, and tamas, the pure, the aggressiveness, and the lethargy. These three combinations, the whole world, the whole action of ours is only a permutation combination of these three gunas. And the beautiful part is that not only we as an individual are governed by these three gunas, even the whole creation, even the yugas are governed by this. So I would like to take you through this journey, Raju, and I would like your input on that. So let us look at it how these three gunas govern the yug and how that governs us and our actions as we talk about it. Okay. So here, so if you look at era, like we know it is the domination of Treta Yuga, where Sattva Guna was the highest. It does not certainly mean, as you will agree with me, that Rajo and Tamas were not there. But in that, the dominance, the predominance of Sattva was highest. So, Raju, your thought on this? This is the definition of sattva gunas dominating in the nature, and that is your like we can link it to the Treta Yuga for that purpose.
Yes, brother. In fact, as Swami says that, as you have already pointed out, it is not that Rajogun and Tamoguna are absent. People of Rajogun and Tamoguna are absent in these periods. So Swami gives the example of, he gives the example of Hiranyakashipu and Prahalada. He says Hiranyakashipu was the embodiment of Rajoguna and to an extent Tamoguna. On
Tamo.
the other hand, his own son Prahalada was an embodiment of Sattva. He says it is not that the other gunas were absent, but predominantly most of the people were in this state, or most of the people spent most of their time in this state of Sattva. And another time, one of the devotees had asked Swami, one of the Italian devotees, I think, yeah, Swami, about good karma and bad karma. Swami spoke about vikarma and sukarma in the discourse. So this person is asking about good karma and bad karma, saying, Swami, how would it be if we kind of continue to do good karma? Swami said, a chain, if it is a golden chain, if it is an iron chain, it still remains a chain. Bad karma is an iron chain, good karma is a gold chain, but chain is still a chain. In the same
It
way,
binds you.
it binds you, it holds you. In the same way, whatever said and done, Sattva Guna is also that, probably it's a golden cage. Yeah, and Damoguna might be that iron cage. But Sattva Guna to an extent is a golden cage. It holds you. Yes, it's beautiful to look around. There is less violence, there is less turbulence, there is less pain, but you're not free. You're not eternally happy. And why? And as you have put it here, it is because it it brings that pride, which is the one that we see in the case of Ravana, which is the one that we see in the case of Vali, which is the one that we see in the case of Ahalya, which is the same pride that we see in the case of the mountain, the Mainaka mountain, which comes up. And Swami beautifully talks about that in the discourse. He says, when Hanuman was flying, Mainaka rises up saying, because his father Vayu was help. In fact, uh, was kind of a compassionate being who helped the Mainaka, and threw him in that sea. Mainaka wanted to help Hanuman. Swami beautifully explains, saying that Mainaka, with good intentions, he wants to help Hanuman, but yet he is not aware that is actually ending up being an obstacle for a devotee on God's mission. He is in fact ending up being an obstacle to Hanuman, and he is deviating Hanuman from the mission that Rama has assigned him. Unaware of this, Mainaka raises up and says, "Please rest on me." From the eyes of the world, it is the eyes of the world. He is a great sattvic entity who is offering help. And in fact, I just to a similar corollary point, one of the brothers who was kind of blessed to stay with Swami in the residence, he would he would walk back from his office with his head bent, and one day he wanted to, probably he was feeling lonely or whatever, he wanted to catch up a conversation, and there was one person who was walking from the office who was kind of crossing him, so they both met, and that person started asking about some updates, and this brother wanted to have a little chat, so he spoke about the things that have happened in the residence previous night, whatever. It is not long, it's just a brief mention of the thing that happened, probably a few seconds, nothing more. And he walked away. And when he enters residence, Swami was not speaking to him. Swami is quite upset for days together. And then he goes and begs Swami that, "Swami, tell me what is the folly that I have committed." And Swami tells him that Swami is not a coffee table subject. He says, "You can, Swami is not about a topic that you can chat about having coffee." Swami corrects, and then he realizes his mistake. The point is, it is talking about Swami. You might feel that, yeah, I'm talking about Swami. But apparently, the Sattvaguna also ends up being a binding. That exactly was the problem with Treta Yuga. And that is what we see with Ravana, with Vali, with Ahalya, and with Shurpanaka.
Very nice. Actually, it's a very beautifully summarized. The nature of Sattva-guna is sublime and effulgent, and as you said, it could be a golden chain or a golden cage. It binds us through the related to pleasure and knowledge. So pleasure, I'm like indulging in pleasure and in knowledge can also be binding. So that is sattva. And let us look at the rajoguna and tamoguna also. That will give us a little bit of understanding of how it flows. So the nature of rajoguna is born out of desires and attachment, kamana and asakti. I have written the Sanskrit words here. That is very important because sometimes the translations, you lose things in the translation. So kamana and asakti asakti is kind of attachment, actually more than attachment. It has got the attachment with little bit of possessiveness, that becomes asakti. Kamana is desire with also possessiveness. I want to possess it. So that is a desire and attachment. And it binds through action, that you will to show off your action, and the desire of the fruit. So it's related fruit. Tamoguna at the end is born out of ignorance, like we saw it, and he says the ignorance of knowledge, ignorance of your action, and it binds through alasya, pramad, and nidra. Laziness, pramad is futile action, effort towards unsatiated desire. Pramad is actually, yeah, it is. It can be understood as the indulgence, overindulgence into desires, which we know logically and experientially that they can never be fully satisfied. And then comes the nidra, the sleep part of it. And when you get succumb to the sleep too much, more than required, then starts binding you. I guess Kumbhakaran was one such example. So you have these three stages: sattva, rajo, and tamogun, and the binding factors. So Raju, your input on these three.
Yes, brother. In fact, the brothers of Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishana stand as Swami says, they stand as epitomes of these three qualities. uh, Vibhishana was the epitome of Sattvika Guna. Then our hero Ravana was of Rajasic Guna, and Kumbhakarna was of Tamasic Guna. And the proportions of each of these would vary. And Swami says in the discourse that ahara, vihara, vichara, achara, vyavahara. These affect the proportions of sattva, rajo, and tamo in in various dimensions. So if your ahara, vihara, vichara, achara, and vyavahara is kind of controlled, it is suffused with love for God, then you would have more of Sattva. If if all these are suffused with attraction, with the passion, with desire, then you have more of Rajoguna. And if more of uh, uh, animal qualities, that is, I want to establish myself as supreme, or I have an entitlement mindset, that kind of gets into tamoguna.
So when you
Yes.
really, it's a very interesting, the understanding, if I may put it like that. When you look at the whole three, how these three gunas, and here also, if you look at it, the binding factor which we are talking about. Look at the pride; it is fluctuating everywhere. It is so in sattva time you see the pride of that, and in tamoguna obviously there is a lot more than pride. It enters everywhere. So that is how we are bound. Now the next point of question would certainly come, like how do we get out of it? What is the solution which Avatar brings with him when he comes as a solution? And let us look at that. So if you look at the tamoguna, we have seen this. The impact of this tamoguna is the illusion of knowledge, and laziness. The alasya is laziness and procrastination, and pramad becomes to be intoxicated and to be careless about. You tend to become little bit as Duryodhan style. You don't care. You feel so proud of yourself and everything that you don't care. You want to indulge more and more. And the nidra brings you sloth, laziness, and it like takes you in this. And Bhagwan, how he has done it, and I found this a very interesting, um, comparison when I look at it. How Swami has made things so simple for us. Bhagwan really did it in a very simple way. The study of dharma, as we are discussing, introspection and self-evaluation. And now, when you look at how he handles alasya, for that he has given us service activities, and for pramad, which is indulgence. So people may think that spirituality is a serious game, and only people with long faces, with castile faces should go in. Actually, Bhagwan was just opposite of that, right? He had fun with everything. So actually he showed us and taught us that you can have fun with God, having God in everything, and that not only becomes fun, it becomes a pure activity leading towards our goals. So engage God in every activity and every thought. That will take care of your pramad point of view. And for countering slumber, he has given us this namasmarana, chanting of God's name. Raju.
Yes, brother. This is beautifully. It is beautifully put, and only an avatar can do this. It is not possible for human to attack a problem in such multi dimensions. He not only, he not only tackles the issue at a symptomatic level, but he actually goes to the root cause. And if you look at the way in which this entire thing is structured, Swami starts this with with self introspection. One of the devotees had asked Swami that, Swami, I'm not able to do this sadhana and self inquiry. He says, Swami, I'm putting lot of effort, 75% of effort in meditation, in doing sadhana. 25 percentage is the self inquiry. I'm not finding tangible benefits. Swami immediately corrects him. He says the proportion should be ulta. 75% should be spent in self inquiry, while 25% should be in sadhana. And even when he says that, another time he says, do not accept me because I tell you something. Come, test me. When you have the benefits, then you accept. Here he is catering to the rational mind of these current times. And he says, don't accept it because I am telling you. You experiment with me, you test me. But once you test me, once you kind of feel the fulfillment of the benefit of this, then you follow. And all that it demands is faith. And the service activities, as Swami elaborates that now he has catered to the rational mindset. Then he says your every activity, because Swami also says that this age is filled with lot of activity, unlike other ages, because of the various circumstances of this age. There's a lot of activity that is going all around, and this activity can be a binding factor. He turns around saying that if you make God as a center point of your activity, everything becomes, that same chains become uh, in fact they kind of turn into a ladder, and they elevate you to God, like that famous incident where the boys were running to mandir, and and the teacher came and complained saying that Swami, there's a lot of indiscipline, boys, it doesn't appear good on the road when they run for darshan. Swami corrected him saying, let them come from inside. That is a solution for appearing bad on the running for roads. Then Swami reprimanded him saying, why is it that your eyes are looking at it in that manner? Why is it that they are not looking to the aspect that the devotees are running for God? A jiva is seeking the love of Paramatma and it is running. Why isn't it appearing from that point of view? And this person was dumbfounded, said, apologies, Swami. And when the boys come to Mandir, Swami goes and corrects them, saying, yes, be disciplined. When you come to Mandir, you should be quite disciplined. Then Swami gives directions. But at the end, Swami also expresses happiness, saying that when you have come running for Swami, Swami is very happy, because that is what you should be doing. A simple act of running, he elevates it to that level of Jivatma becoming Paramatma, running
So
to
sweet.
Paramatma. And one boy comes up to Swami saying, says, Swami, give me Vishwarupa. And Swami does not say, you close your eyes and I will give you those thousands and thousands. I'm saying, primary school boy, fifth class boy, third class boy. Swami holds him, Swami turns him around, and he shows the entire Kulwant, all the thousands of people sitting. He says, that is Vishwarupa. All those heads, all the hands, all the eyes are of the God himself.
Beautiful.
That
Beautiful.
simple act of congregation, he elevates it to, by bringing God, he elevates it to something else. And that is what he has done,
Beautiful.
of the binding factors into the factors that relieve us. This is the role of the Purnavatar.
Raju, why don't you address here? A brother is asking this question. Srinivas Balasubramanian. He's asking, what is the difference between an avatar and a Purna avatar? What has Bhagwan said about it?
Yes, brother. In fact, we had, earlier we had discussed this, that every avatar, in fact, avatar can be any embodiment that comes down. Each one of us is an avatar. Like Swami says that if you look at, for example, Rama, it is actually a human with some constraints. Swami, very nice, very beautifully, Swami puts that equation in a mathematical form, saying that God is equal to man plus desire, human plus desire. If you take away that desire, or human is equal to God minus desire. If you take away that desire, that human and God, there is no difference. And and he says, in fact, and that line when he says, I created myself from myself because I wanted to love myself. That want itself is a desire, and hence the human aspect came up. And when this human aspect, when this desire gets tainted with the level of desire, if this desire is only for the body, if this desire is only for the mind, if desire is only for my family, then I become human, then I get lost. If this desire is only for sustenance of this existence, then I become a animal. If this desire is for progressing, means acquisition of material wealth, I kind of become a tamasic person. Now, when this desire gets elevated to alleviating the suffering all around me, then you become that Amsha. People start calling you Amshavatar. But when that desire evolves to a level where I have to free everyone from the bondage of karma, not not this loka, but all the lokas together, then it comes to be called as Purnavatar. And Swami says that is pure selfless desire. And at that point, there is no difference between desire, human, or God. It's all three are one. And
Beautiful.
a technical definition, as Swami says, our Purnavatar has 16 kalas, and Swami also elaborates what are the 16 kalas. And in fact, we had probably, brother, you
Dana
can,
session.
yes, you can kind of guide.
No, those are technical definitions, which you are rightly said. But the way you explained about that, the concept of how every being is avatar, first of all, every element of creation is an avatar, but how it gets increased from ordinary stone consciousness to the supreme Purna avatar consciousness is that through the divine desire, what you have mentioned is amazing, is a very beautiful. I hope, Brother Srinivas, you would have got your answer. So, in continuing, Raju, I would like you to explain or get into that. What Bhagwan explained uh, about our yugas, that how
Yes,
life is governed in yugas, and
yes.
then look at the importance of it and what course of action and solutions which Bhagwan has given. So, I'm going to flash this, and I would like you to explain that to everybody. There's an interesting approach.
Yes, in
Go for it.
fact, yes, Swami talks about, all of us have heard the descriptions where Devas have gone and asked Dadichi for his bones so that they can make a weapon out of it and kill Asuras. Or Mandata has given his spinal column to make Vajrayuda for Indra. What essentially have they, or we have what essentially have they given? We have read of the descriptions where only bones of those sages, they were seen, because it reads like they're so emaciated that nothing of the flesh was left. Swami beautifully says that life in Treta Yuga was was in bones. As long as the bones of the body could sustain, life sustain, people could live. And that time, the importance, the point of conflict was devas. If you look at, for example, why why many rakshasas, devatas have fought, it is because to get the grace of Narayana or Shiva. God's love becomes the prime point of confrontation or consolation or friendship, and their course of action was filled with value and love for God. And because all these were existing, the modus operandi for attaining eternal freedom or ananda is dhyana or meditation. That is a modus operandi of Kritega, and bones were the holders of life, and life of love for God is the central focal point of existence.
Beautiful. Let's look at Treta Yoga now.
Yes, brother. Brother, I would request you to lead
No, no,
this.
carry on. Give the whole thing. I think the flow is very nice. You have mentioned
Yeah, and
some
in fact,
very
Treta
proper.
Yuga, as we see, Swami talks about Treta Yuga, where life is now from bones, life comes down to muscles. That is because so the importance moves from Daiva Prema, Daiva to Dharma. There is that one level it comes down, and because of that, life also kind of comes down, moves down from bones to muscle. As long as muscles could sustain, life could go on. Like take the case of, for example, Jatayu. When Jatayu was hit by Ravana, he was able to sustain for time till Rama comes and gives him that blessing. But it is also that his muscle is cut. Now, when muscle is cut, he finds it quite difficult to sustain, unlike the times of Krita Yuga. And that is also the reason of dharma being important than daiva. Every conversation that happened, if you look at Ramayana, every conversation that happened was about dharma or adharma. Ahalya comes and reports to Rama saying that how why she was dharmic or adharmic, or Vibhishana comes and tells Rama as to why Ravana was dharmic or adharmic, or Sugriva comes to Rama and says why Vali was dharmic or adharmic. Rama himself tells Jabali as to why he is dharmic and why not adharmic. And Bharata comes and has a long conversation with Rama about whether dharma is greater or prema is greater. Or you look at, for example, Sita Rama conversation, they talk about the dharma of wife and dharma of husband. It's all about dharma, dharma, dharma. Daiva, unfortunately, takes a little backseat And here the protection of dharma becomes the prime focal point of existence, and establishing dharma becomes the way in which happiness can be spread in this yuga. That is as Swami defines it. And now, if we move
That's
to Dwapara, Swami says it was Daiva in Krita, then it becomes Dharma in Treta, then in Dwapara it becomes Dhana. If you look at the war, entire war has happened because dharma, dhana was the point of confrontation, and blood. It's another significant point. Is now becomes when dhana becomes the prime point, life moves from muscles to blood as long as blood could sustain. And from taking from Mahabharata's explanation, Duryodhana laments to Ashwadhama and Kritavarma that the blood from his body is oozing out, and he might pass away any time. Bones. Point is, bones are still there, the muscle is still there, but when the blood is oozing out, he says, "Now blood is going away. I might die very fast. Take revenge. Go and kill those Pandavas in the night camp." The point is about that life being sustained as long as blood remains. And why blood? Swami says blood is also that circulates. In fact, one prime characteristic of dhana is circulation. If it is in circulation, it remains good. If blood accumulates, it becomes a problem. If dhana accumulates, it becomes a problem. So the man Duryodhana wanted to accumulate dhana, or he wanted to accumulate that blood, and it had created uh, terrible repercussions, not just for him, for his entire kingdom. And here Archana, or the worship of God, Archana is the prime methodology of earning God's grace in this Yuga, that is Dwapara Yuga. And in Kali Yuga, now from Daiva it becomes Dharma, from Dharma it becomes Dana, and from Dana it becomes Daya. At least humans, now all that is left for humans is we should have the final point is Daya, compassion. Without this, human turns into beast or Rakshasa. The only thing that differentiates between a human and a Rakshasa is that Daya. And it is the last leg which bereft of this, human ceases to be human. Now, because daya or compassion becomes the prime point of focus, now the life moves down from blood to food. As long as you have food, as long as you can eat food, as long as you're able to consume food, life kind of sustains itself. That's why Swami says the ability of the human to live long from Krita to Kali reduces. This is the scientific explanation that Swami gives in the discourse. And
that's
the way in which we can establish happiness is practice of daya or compassion. And Swami says this is the easiest of all yugas because namasmarana. We can take up namasmarana and we can attain God's grace. Yes, brother.
beautiful.
I would request you
You know,
to.
when I look at this chart, I find such a, like, what a beautiful way Bhagwan has explained the whole thing from a skeleton, wherein at that era everybody was so engrossed to gain God, whether by hook or crook. Like Danavas, as you rightly said, you know, Danava wanted to take Shiva with him. uh, Ravana wanted to take Shiva with him at that time, Satyug also, and then even Bali wanted to take Narayan as a gatekeeper. So there is a chase in there, but the whole essence was bones. So it was bone is basically a skeleton of a human being that way, and that reflects the kind of essence people are living in. And when it comes to muscle, it is the relationship of power. Then you come into the power factor, wherein when you want to exert your prominence, your existence through showing off your muscle power. And that is where the activity of dharma is important, because if your exertion of power is not based on dharma, it creates a problem. So everything was based on that muscle power. Everybody wanted to show off that they are very powerful, so it becomes a very physical thing from the skeleton we come to the physical, and then you come to Dwapara, wherein the blood you mentioned, Bhagwan, blood also relates to family. If you look at it, it's a family blood relationships. So it is a family which becomes the pivot point in Dwapar Yuga. So you have a family war, the fight between two families, the fight between possessiveness of superiority of a one family. So everybody, Yadava as a one family, Kauravas as one, Pandavas as one. So there is a lot of blood involved, and they are all fighting for the wealth, obviously. And obviously, solution was you worship, and that is where I think Arjun won the game because he chose Krishna over the army. So the element of worship, if you call it, if I look at it that way, even though he was surviving through the effect of his brothers. There were power was all the brothers together, but the solution was in surrendering to God. So worship became the thing, and in Treta Yuga, Dharma became the source of sustenance. And in Kali, you have mentioned food, and that is amazing. Food represents the body, so imagine how selfish we tend to be in Kali Yuga. So food also represents me, mine, kind of, that narrowness of thought, that my body, my figure, my personality. So we are into that me, mine as a food part of it. And look at what he has given the solution for it, and Namasmaran. So simple, huh? If you really look at it, how simplified it is. It sounds so funny, and sometimes it's like laughable. How can you solve all the problem of Kali Yuga just by Namasmaran? But honestly speaking, it is the most effective and the easiest remedy for everything. I think, Raju, this diagram is superb. Viewers, you're welcome to share your thoughts, because this is what we have summarized, what Bhagwan has shared, and I think it's beautiful, self-explanatory in that way, Raju.
Yes, brother. And that
Uh, okay, if you have anything to add, otherwise I would like to you have to also share about these the four faces of Dharma. You
right.
remember? Yeah,
Coming to
this
that.
is also how in Krita Yuga there are four areas which were used to practice Dharma. Raju, you want to talk about them?
Yes, brother. Swami says that the four facets for practicing dharma is or satya, daya, tap, and dana. Now, when satya, that is adherence to truth, daya, compassion, tapas, austerity, and dana, charity. When these four are exhibited, you tend to be the human tend to be in Kritayuga. The circumstance becomes Kritayuga. The family becomes the family of Kritayuga. Swami beautifully says it. There was Kali Yuga even in Kritayuga. There is Kritayuga even in Kali Yuga. We cannot at a there is one fine day we open our eyes and it becomes Dwapara. It is not that simple. One fine day we close our eyes and then Kali age ends. It is not that. The definition of even this age is also dependent on practice of these values. If each of us are able to be adherents of truth or satya, if you are able to show daya, if you are able to exhibit this tapas, if you are able to undertake tapas as Swami gives the definition at various levels, and dana, if you are able to do dana uh, in the way that Swami expects us to do dana, then yes, we become part of Kritega or the golden age. Now, brother,
I like the way you have mentioned, that so the moment we practice all four, we are in Satyug. And that is the key word I would like to highlight again, that it is physically we can say that yug was called Satyug, but that element of Satyug is these four practices. So if we can imbibe these four today, then we can experience, that's what I think, Raju, you're trying to say, right? That we
yes,
can experience that aura, that magnanimity, that grandeur of Satyug. That is an amazing thought, for everybody. And go on.
Yes, brother, if you can, my submission is, if you can, if you just go back to the previous slide, just for our continuations, I just want to make a point. Just, yeah. Now, all the viewer brothers and sisters, I would like you to take a note of this: the life sustenance in bones, in muscles, in blood, and food. So in Krita Yuga it is bones, in Treta it is muscle, in Dwapara it is blood, and in Kali it is food. You live long if life sustains in bones. You live short if life sustains in food. Now, this is the premise. We are talking of a very wellness, from the wellness point of, even from wellness point of view. If you want to live long, now this is the way we should live. Now, if you want to be a part of Krita Yuga, what is it that you should do? Or if you want to experience the benefits of life, what is it that you should do? Swami gives the answer in a packaged way. Swami says, and the next slide, as brother has just displayed, we should follow the Satya, Daya, Dana, and Tapas. Krita Yuga, when we follow Satya, when we follow Daya, when we follow Tapas, when we follow Dana, automatically we become part of Krita. These people, you look at all the people, it is not me saying, but all the research which says all those people who have had this longevity of life, some way or the other, they have displayed these characteristics. People who have those sages and saints who have lived for, there's a sage supposedly 800-year-old person here recently left his body quite some 150
Yes,
kilometers from my
yes,
place, and all these people have exhibited this. Now, if we take away Satya but only practice Daya, Tapas, and Dana, then we tend to experience the factors of Treta Yuga. So our life comes down from bones, it comes down to muscle, and then we tend to focus more for the important activity in our life kind of becomes Dharma instead of Daiva. Then establishing Dharma becomes a focal point of our of our existence, and we become part of Treta Yuga when we leave Satya. Now, when we leave Satya and Daya, but have only tapas and dana, we become part of Dwapara. So we tend to have a good amount of wealth, but however, longevity is lost. It comes down to blood. Then Archana, external form of worship, becomes the most important point of our lives, and we become part of Dwapara Yuga. Now, when we leave Satya, when we leave Daya, when we leave Tapas, all that we do is only Dana, we become part of Kali Yuga. But it's a very important point. I would request, brother, if you can kindly elaborate as to the point that we were talking yesterday about Dana.
yes. Actually, if you really look at it, when Brother Raju said that you leave Satya or you leave compassion in Dwapar Yuga, it is not completely leaving. It could be neglecting. It could be oversight. So when we don't give importance to truth and daya, then we enter Dwapar Yuga. That is Dwapar Yuga. When we don't give too much of importance to truth, that is Treta Yuga. And when we don't give importance to truth, daya, and tapas, then it becomes Kali Yuga. Now, look at the irony of Kali Yuga. We are talking about Dan as an attribute of Kali Yuga, and today you can see it. We have got n numbers of charitable organizations. We have got self-made gods and prophets and all the gurus of the world who are engaging into enormous amount of charity, so to say. But look at it. This is the effect of Kali, that everybody is indulging in it, because that is how we show that we have truth, compassion, and tapas. But people forget that Dan, which Swami Bhagwan Baba has promoted, was not an activity in silos. It was not an activity in isolation. It was an outcome of activity by following truth, by depicting daya, and by practicing your sadhana. So, what ultimately happens was defined by Bhagavan as dhan, as charity. So, he did not start a school or a water project because he wanted to do water project. It was out of the truth that all are one, everybody is mine. He could not see the separation. And out of compassion, the effect which manifested was water project. It so happened that the water project was the largest in anybody could conceive. It happened that it was a free education. It happened that it was a free healthcare, the biggest hospital possible in a village. All that is an outcome of something else. It was not a standalone activity. He was not in a chase to start schools and hospitals and water projects. So Avatar is very beautifully shown, and in Kali Yuga we see that people do not do any of these three things. They don't. We don't follow what is truth, what is Satyam, what is my life, who am I. That questions is not asked. It is not out of compassion. It is out of the media PR that we are giving charity. If the tax exemption is not given, many corporates will stop giving charity. So everything is a PR activity. So there is no compassion for service. It is service as service is done as an activity. It is not done as a compassionate expression of a heart. And it is not part of our tapas. What is tapas? That I want to achieve something better in my life. I want to achieve God. I want to do something. And in that expression comes a desire to help, comes an expression to serve. And that becomes charity. So if you look at Bhagwan's format in his organization and in his followership, he is very clear that I am not here in the chase of starting schools. Otherwise, do you think Bhagwan did not have the physical prowess and the capacity and the means to start schools everywhere? He would have flooded the whole country or world in schools. But that was not his purpose. What he showed was an act of compassion and focus on truth. That he came and said, I want you to know that you are God. And okay, you want to study, I'll make a school also. But the goal is that you should know that you are God. And in the school, we said, Swami, you want to do drama? I said, okay, I'll give you costumes, I'll give you music and everything, but not to do drama. You can do drama and do the best drama to know that you are God. That is why all the conversations which happened on the sports ground, in the drama practices, it was all focused on the truth. And it was his compassion which manifested into a mammoth indoor stadiums, a Hillview Stadium, hospital. It is an expression of the truth. So this chart, I felt so like touched by Bhagwan's activity, that how logical and scientific also, if you look at it, how Bhagwan has really made it that for him the charity was not an activity, it was an outcome of an activity. The act of service was not an act, it was an expression of a bubbling heart, a compassionate heart. And if you do not have that compassionate heart, then the activity becomes a calendar activity and the whole purpose is lost. So today, if we go around telling that I have done some hundred of soup kitchens, or I have served in so many people, I fed so many people, or I gave water to thirsty, that's a good activity. But it cannot be called dan. That dan is not a connotation of an activity, it is an expression of the self. And I think that is what touches me most when I look at the whole chart of Bhagwan, how he has given us these beautiful formulas to look at it. If I may say that, Rom, it's like a code in front of my eyes. That in Kali Yuga, if you promote truth, without truth you can't have charity. Without compassion you cannot have charity. And without austerity, without tapas, charity becomes an act. Whereas charity must be an outcome of your tapas. I think it is phenomenal. Thank you, Raju, for bringing this version here in front of us. It's beautiful.
Beautifully expressed, beautifully put. In fact, that's the reason. In fact, why Krishna does not hold Karna as an example to humanity. He was
Yes,
embodiment of charity in some sense. But what was it born of? Is it born out of ego or is it born out of the truth and compassion, as you mentioned? That is
yes,
where Krishna judged him differently.
yes. So it's such a subtle message there. Eh? It's such a subtle
Right.
message. So, and
Exactly.
finally, you have this this act of leading to God. See, everything what Bhagwan has done, everything what Bhagwan has promoted for our evolution, for our betterment, was always focused towards God. And that is what fascinates my imagination also. That anything which he did, whether it was playing, whether it was singing bhajans, or going out on a field trip, or anything, he somehow brought God as a pivot point. And let us look at this, Raju. In different yugas, how can you please take us through this journey of
Yes.
how these acts were done? Yes, please.
Yeah, Swami talks uh, about how God can be reached in each of these yugas. How the supreme God, when we meet, when we say God, that happiness, endless happiness, that supreme self, how is it that it can be attained? Swami says austerity in Kritaiga required a following of austerity, tapas, then yajna, yaga, and yoga. Now, as the time changed, as the times changed, we just discussed the longevity of life also reduced. Life moved from bones to muscle, so you cannot have such long lives, and your priorities also shift. And the concessions were kind of made because of circumstances. The mind becomes sharper and sharper. So from tapas is kind of dropped. Yajna, yaga, and yoga become the tools of achieving the supreme self in the times of Treta Yuga. Now, when we come to Dwapara, tapas and yajna dropped. It is yaga and yoga which become the tools for attaining the supreme self. And in Kali Yuga, it is only yoga. Now, here is where Swami makes a beautiful definition. He says, what do you mean by this yoga? Yoga at each of these points meant a different meaning. Krita, the yoga of definition was different. Treta, it is different. Dwapara, different. And in Kali Yuga, Swami elaborates saying that this yoga in the age of Kali means it is Bhakti Yoga, the simplest of all. And that's where Namasmarna comes in. Again, we have to keep in mind when we are referring to Kali, we are not referring, we are, yeah, to an extent, we are making a reference to that specific period where the dominant force of humanity lives in the Kali age. But even if a state of your mind, if the state of our mind is filled with only giving, the shadow without the fundamental basis of the foundations of truth, of compassion, that is Satya, then Daya, then Tyaga, without those, if it is only about giving dana, then we are said to be in the times of Kali. And for that mindset, namasmarana itself is enough because it is not evolved. So I mean, it cannot grasp the entirety of that supreme self, and hence the first step that we can take up is namasmarana. Now, once that kind of settles down, if we go back to the previous chart, and here, if we can in some sense link both of them. Now, slowly as giving comes, so Swami says, pretending, you pretend, you tend, and you end up being that. Even if you start with that pretension of giving, then slowly it becomes a tapas, and that's where slowly uh, uh, tapas enters, and then we kind of move into the Dwapara kind of mindset, and from there we realize that human heart is filled with compassion, daya, and we move into Treta mindset, and that's where yajna comes in. So yoga, then yaga is the the sacrificial, the fire. You have that physical activity basically of offering the ghee in the fire, and then yajna, it is the mental activity of it's the other half, the
Raju,
passive half.
Raju, sorry to interrupt. I think it would be nice to share a little bit about yajna. How is it different from yaga? Because this yajna yaga, as a speech, we always use it as a, you know equivalent statements. But in Bhagavad Gita also, uh, it is explained. Yajnas are explained in a very many ways. So there are different ways of yajna. and then there are different ways of yagas.
Yeah.
So if you can explain the different yajnas so that it gets a clarity why we have translated it as sacrificial pledges, so
So
it will help.
Swami, in fact, beautifully talks about in the discourse which preceded the Sahasra Chandra Darshan Yajna, and also the Rudram chanting, Mass Rudram chanting. So those discourses, Swami talks about Yagam. Swami very specifically talks about Yagam and ghee being offered and all that. And when the drama was put up for that occasion, Atridra Mahayagni occasion, something of around that period, Swami called the boys and said, "Great yajnam is done today." Swami did not say yagam. And then Swami went on to elaborate. He said, when yajnam and yaga is that physical activity which involves that fire or an activity, physical activity, and yajnam is the mental activity. It is the perspective. It is that mental effort that it is put in. Yajna involves physical sacrifice. Physically, you're giving away something. Sorry, yaga involves physically parting away something. Yajna involves the mental uh, detachment of whatever bad qualities or bindings that hold us from realizing ourselves. So one is of a mental and one is of a physical level. And
There
as
are
we are,
many yajnas in Bhagavad Gita also it mentions, right? You can do yajnam of thoughts, you can do yajnam of desires, that you're offering your bad deeds or bad vasanas into our God. That is yajna. So you make a pledge, you decide that yes, I want to give up, I want to do, that is yajna. And yaga is that the external part of it. I think there are some few words also in Bhagavad Gita. They have defined different types of yajnas. I think it
yes,
is
right.
chapter 8 or something like that. I'm not so sure about the number, but it is there.
Yes, brother. Yes. In fact, many yajnas and some 164 yagas are defined. Eight yajnas are defined in our scriptures. And Swami beautifully puts it that, uh, in fact, there is one drama in which the topic was about Swami's literature, and I very clearly remember that character was Kasturi. He says at the end of the drama, the character puts up a dialogue saying that Swami's literature, if there is one thing about this literature, is this. He says there is no question that is left unanswered. There is no definition that is left without being given. There is no doubt that is being that is left unresolved. There is answer to every sort of question that you have. All that we need to do is take up and read. When this dialogue was being delivered, I was watching Swami's expression. I had written the drama, I was watching from behind Swami's expression. I was stunned with that way in which Swami said some, "Avunu," every dialogue says, "Avunu, Avunu," he says, like he was emphatically. Those were the days when Swami was actually physically, he was kind of feeling difficult even to talk, to raise his hand. But at that point, he was emphatically hitting that throne, saying, "Yes, Avunu," every line he says, స్వామి ఈ సోమవారం అందించినటువంటి ఈ సాహిత్యం తీర్చినటువంటి సమస్య లేదు. ద డైలాగ్ గోస్ ఆన్, తెలుగు డైలాగ్, అండ్ ఫర్ ఎవ్రీ లైన్ సమ్స్ ఎంఫాటికల్, ఎస్, ఎస్, ఎస్. And the end when he says all that we need to do is just take up and read, Swami nodded violently and looked at all everybody and said, "That is all that I ask for. అదే రా నేను అడిగేది. That's all that I ask for." No, if we spend enough time on Swami's literature, I think we will find definitions and beautiful definitions, definitions that kind of awe us, that kind of hold us in sheer awe. And it is a living document. The same discourse reads like one message, and the same discourse reads completely different in other circumstances. The living document, the Sai message of Sai lives in those words. All they have to do is just take up and read it, brother.
That's beautiful. No, I'm really, as the time comes to close, I'm always awed by Bhagwan's timing, that how he gives us the thoughts and how he has narrated the whole script in this way, that each and every element has got so much to explore, so much to learn, and you know, I don't think there's any end to it, but we are just grateful that we are able to dive into it and at least take a flavor of what Bhagwan has given us. So it is wonderful to look at the backdrop of Avatar, the backdrop of the era, that place, the situations in which Avatar has taken birth, and the various reasons which physically prepare the advent of Avatar. Like Bhagwan says that why gods and avatars are born mostly in Indian continent, and he said for a major play to happen, you need a bigger stage. You know, you can't have it on the street. So for street, you have street shows. But when a whole symphony has to happen with all the 9 yards, then you need a stage of that caliber. So India, Bharatvarsh, if I may say, is that stage which has been prepared by our rishis, by our saints and seers, which is kind of appropriate for an avatar's advent, so that avatar could come and enact his play. So it is a very beautiful thing that how when that era, that mood changes, how Avatar comes equipped with that, and he expresses himself from that point of view. So I would request people who have raised this point about Purna Avatar and Ansha Avatar and all that. Don't. It is good to know from a definition point of view, but don't get trapped into it. Like to say that Parshuram was a lesser god than Sri Ram, or to say Sri Ram was a lesser god than Bhagwan Krishna, or the Satyasai was lesser or more god than others, is Bhagwan would laugh and say it's your ignorance. If you still talk about the differentiation between Shiv and Narayan, then you have still not understood who I am. So the fact of the matter is, it is the way Avatar expresses himself that defines, that creates definition in our head. But can we say from the core they were different? That will be foolish. That will be totally ignorant, because that is the master's game, how he chooses to enact. Because as we explore Ramayana further, we will see that we have done this mistake of calling Ram as Anshavatar. We always compare him with Krishna and say, okay, Krishna showed off his things and Rama did not. When I do little bit of study, I realize that it is our ignorance which talks that way. But Ram has shown all of that. He has given commentaries. He has done everything what an avatar does. Only thing is we are only looking at a story of Ram from a very movie like an eyes. We won't have masala elements, but we don't want to really understand the story of Avatar. So hopefully, as the journey continues, we would be able to bring out those elements of Bhagwan Ram's life, which would highlight his the grace and the grandeur of Lord Ram, how he played. What do you say, Raju?
Absolutely, brother. Yes, as you said, Swami very beautifully, very subtly indicates that there is not any difference between Rama avatar and Krishna avatar. He makes those points for the reader. If he reads it with that perspective, those similarities are striking right from the childhood. Swami also goes on to explain that even Sai avatar is also not different. It's just that our we have put those colored glasses of one being greater, one being lesser, one being different. For the Lord, it is just the same. There were occasions where Swami would one boy was when Swami was throwing those chocolates, that boy was jumping up and was trying to hold the chocolate. Swami was a bit upset. Swami said, "Hey, Angada, even during those times you jumped around, now also jumping around." Swami just scolded him. It was so for Swami, there is no difference between that time and this time. Another time when Swami is giving discourse uh, about Krishna cutting his finger, and Swami spoke about Draupadi tearing away her sari, and he said just like that boy in the character who tore his shirt for getting something for Swami, for tying some bundle. Like that only Draupadi also do. Those days also this fellow used to tear clothes like that. And Krishna Swami very casually made a statement. Because for him, there is no difference between that period or this period. To our minds, to our eyes, the difference exists.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Ajan Bahu. Thank you so much, Brother Raju. And I'm just nothing more except the gratitude to our Lord for allowing us to really immerse ourselves every weekend on this beautiful journey. So I pray Bhagavan to continue to bless us so that we can continue this offering further and share this wonderful joy with all our brothers and sisters here. And thank you all for watching. And please feel free to share. This will be on the channel. And if you have any suggestions, any thoughts, any suggestions or questions, welcome to email us or send us note. Thank you so much. Sai Ram Raju.
Sai Ram, brother. Sai Ram.
Bye.